As you'll see in the report, there are 38 performance indicators which we measure against, of which 26 are for the corporate plan and 12 are the general corporate KPIs, the health check KPIs. Just looking at the overall performance, taking it all together, we have 27 out of the 38 have been achieved within 22-23. That's a performance rate of 71% overall, which is a good level of performance for us. Looking at those ones where we haven't achieved, we're just about 20% against the targets. And what we have done in this report, as we've done in other reports when we presented it previously, is identify those areas where there have been some successes, where we've been able to achieve the targets, and those areas where we may not necessarily been able to fully achieve those targets. And if we look at the corporate plan, for example, we're doing really well in relation to the advice and the advice service we provide in relation to debt, which is particularly important at this time in relation to cost of living. We've been very successful, obviously, in securing the levelling up funding for the Ashbourne project, and we're now in the process of actually implementing the work for the EV charge points across the district as well. Areas where we've not necessarily achieved what we wanted to achieve during 22-23. There's still some more work to be done on the master plan for Ashbourne Airfield. Unfortunately, we weren't able to achieve what we wanted to achieve in relation to the redevelopment of the Bakewell Road site in Matlock, and we still have one or two recruitment challenges within the regeneration service. In terms of the key performance indicators, we had a 75% success rate in relation to those, and the areas where we were slightly down in relation to those health check indicators and they're only marginally down, is in relation to sickness and the rate at which we've collected council tax and the business rates. I wouldn't normally say any more about what's in there. There's a detailed appendix in to the report which sets out the performance on a quarter-by-quarter basis for each of the 38 indicators. One thing I will mention that we have included in this report for the first time is the response, the data that's been now published by the Office for Local Government. They've now published two set of metrics, one in relation to finance and the other in relation to household waste and the waste and recycling services. These are not 22-23 but 21-22, and the officers responsible for both of those services have provided commentary within the report. And what you'll see in relation to the waste collection service is that, and if you look at the graphs that are in the Appendix 3, in relation to waste collection and recycling, we're doing really well. Our household waste recycling levels is way above the England national average, and similarly the residual household waste is way above the national average as well. And as if you recall, when we did the presentation to members on the corporate plan, the evidence from CADA, which they produced to sort of demonstrate, if you like, where we were in relation to sort of the facts and figures for the district, that also showed the same information, that we're doing really well in relation to that. We may have had some blips along the way, but even with those blips, we're doing well. We're doing better than elsewhere. In terms of the finance indicators, you'll see that, again, we do really well in relation to those finance indicators. We've got good sets of reserves. The level of council tax, okay, is slightly higher than the average, but our level of debt is lower than the English average. And I'm happy to take any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Councillor. I wonder, Mike, if we have red sections in there and there's improvement plans around them, how are we going to capture those going forwards, or is that rolling up into the next corporate plan? And if so, how does that inform that? Just so I've got an understanding, that's all. Thank you.
That's a good question. There's a couple of aspects of that. And the first bit is there will always be legacy projects which we continue with from the old corporate plan. And that was obviously things that we need to factor into the work going forward on the new corporate plan in terms of the resources available to deliver on that. And what we'll need to do is we'll need to make sure there's a process in place which captures those and reports those back to members in the future. The second aspect to that is, obviously this report covers the key performance indicators. Those key performance indicators have been the same key performance indicators for probably, 20 years, I would suggest. So we have been reporting those year on year to members over the course of the time that I've been with the authority. So we are able to sort of see how those, we could if necessary track how those ones have changed over time. But generally, most of the key performance indicators we do pretty well with. But we will be reporting those. One of the issues, though, we have been thinking about and need to give some thought to is the extent to which we may look at those key performance indicators being, are they the right key performance indicators to demonstrate the health of the authority? There's still some work and still some thinking to be done on that. So for the time being, those will be, if we decide that it's appropriate to change those, then obviously we'll bring those through this committee going forward. But then if we do then change those, then we'll then report the results of those back to members.
Brilliant. So can I just follow on, just because my question was around the KPI. So I find that really interesting that we've not adjusted these, or changed these for quite a long time. So it probably seems like a really good time to have a think about them, both in terms from an officer's point of view and from a member's point of view. Obviously, just looking at your table, we've got 3 reds on the KPIs, and I know kind of staff sickness can be very variable. So, but I suppose what I'm interested in, and I know Paul brought a report to us at last council meeting in terms of looking at staffing, kind of recruitment, all these things. So I just wanted to see how that plays into that context. And then just my other question on the other 2 red KPIs, which are both related to the collection of council tax and sort of non-domestic rates. And although we've missed the target by a very small amount, I would be very interested to have that converted into a financial figure. So even though we've only missed the first one, the council tax, by 0.6%, it would be very interesting to know, actually, does that have a value? Is that a late collection, or is that we don't collect at all in the year? So it could be quite a sizable chunk of money that we're missing out on, and the same for the non-domestic rates.
In terms of that latter question in relation to the collection rates, and what that means in terms of finance, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. But what I can do is I can ask the question of the finance team to give me a value on that, and we can circulate that around to members.
I suggest that we minute the items that we would like further information, so that Mike, you can come back at a later meeting and provide us with the answer. So I think that is one of those.
Yeah. So I mean, just to quickly follow up before you kind of pick up the other point. I mean, it would be very interesting to see, because if part of the reason that we're not able to sort of collect that final amount is down to capacity within the officer team, I'm sure we could make a very good argument that actually, if the money that we could collect, if we had extra capacity, offset the cost of the staff member, then it would seem like a no-brainer to do. So I think that would be interesting just to dig a little bit deeper into.
Thank you, Chair. I can give a general response to that. I don't think it is that issue, if I'm honest. I think the issue is related to the fact that through the COVID period, there was various grants which supported businesses which clearly they became reliant upon. Those grants have now ceased in a cost of living crisis, so the ability to pay perhaps may be impacted by that. And in terms of council tax, again, through the COVID period, we actually abstained from taking people to court through debt collection proceedings. And that period was, from memory, probably around 12 months. So gradually they've started to be caught up, and we are gradually going through those cases. Clearly there's an impact in terms of how long you can get through the courts for that. So I think a combination of grants for businesses, no debt recovery during the COVID on council tax, and the cost of living crisis is probably culminating in the fact that that is slightly lower than we have done traditionally. But I've certainly had no feedback to indicate that it's a lack of staffing resource, which is perhaps reassuring for you.
In terms of, Councillor Whitehead, your question about sickness, it is a bit transient in terms of the way in which the sort of figures are sort of adjust themselves each year, and clearly, you know, during COVID, in some respects, the COVID element of the sickness was taken out. That's now factoring back in. So we now actually include COVID within the calculations. And whilst the levels of COVID haven't been necessarily during the course of 22, 23 particularly high, they are now beginning to creep back in this year. But you know, we have counted some COVID back in that, so there is an element of COVID going into the figures for 22, 23. But one of the issues that we have is we're a small authority. The levels of sickness that we get are generally relatively low, but they can be skewed, and they can be skewed very quickly. I'm not the HR person. So I've got the list, I've got the question, I've got the answers, not necessarily all the answers, but I was prepared for this. But you know, they can be skewed by people having operations or having long-term sickness, and that can have an impact upon those overall figures. And it can only take one or two people across the authority to get to that situation. One of the things that the authority does do well, though, is it does have a sickness monitoring process in place. So we are able to, as managers, we are required to have a little chat, a little conversation with those staff when they come back, just to see how they are, make sure that they're okay, make sure there's nothing underlying what's happening. But we also have a tracking process as well to make sure that, you know, the levels of sickness don't get too excessive on an individual basis, or they don't have the patterns of sickness that, you know, you might see Fridays and Saturdays and Fridays and Mondays, for example. So there are processes built in to enable us to make sure we're monitoring sickness. If officers get to a certain level, then they trigger more discussions with them about their sickness levels. So those sorts of things allow us to make sure that, you know, people are aware that we're looking at them, if you like, but not being in a heavy-handed way. The other thing that I think we're also really good at as an authority is in terms of our ability to be able to help people where they need help. And I think, you know, there are routes that we have available to us, and that's not just, you know, physical, but it's also mental, the mental side of things as well. So, you know, if there are aspects of a person's necessity for help in regards to sort of physical issues or in relation to mental health, then we have the ability through our HR team to be able to get access to them. So all of those allow us to be able to keep on top of what's happening with the staff, and hopefully make sure that, you know, they're well enough to be able to perform at the best level that they can throughout the whole of the course of a financial year.
Well, can I just add something to your point there? Would it be useful if we had a distribution of number of staff and length of time people were off? Would that be useful to understand the statistic in a bit more detail? Mm-hmm. Which will give that information. Thank you.
So just my couple of final points. So is there an error at the top of the second part of the chart, so the one about household waste. So you've got a target of 58, but your actual outturn's 52. So if you're below, should it be green? Are we aiming for lower than target, or should it be above target? So if you go to section 5.1, the second of the KPIs, which is the percentage of household waste which has been sent for reuse, recycling, we've got a target of 58.5, but the actual report is telling us we're currently at 52.7. So I'm just trying to understand, should it be lower than target? Does that make it green, or should actually we have a higher target for reuse? Can you see what? Because obviously, I mean, because we know as an authority we're actually very good, one of the best in the country in terms of our percentage of recycling, and it's quite reassuring to see the target set high. But if we're not hitting target, it'd probably be good to sort of maybe understand why that is, and that might come into a wider question about sort of waste collection. But it would just be good just to understand why we're not hitting target, and what are the particular areas, and is there something that we could kind of focus on to sort of get that more on target? I think Paul's going to jump in.
I can give you an immediate answer on that. That figure was impacted by the closure of Vital Earth facility in Ashbourne. So that's where most of our anaerobic waste used to go to. That facility was closed. In the intervening period, whilst new disposal arrangements were put in place, we did see a downturn in recycling. So I hazard a guess that that is the main cause of that.
Target.
It certainly should be this year.
Yeah. And then my final point was really just to come back to my first point in terms of the sort of KPIs we should be maybe looking to develop. And what I would personally love to see is something, because we talk about being a very compassionate council and we lead by example, but I can't see any KPIs that sort of measure us against that in terms of what's our staff morale like, what's our service user customer feedback like. I think they should be some of the most important KPIs for us as a council, but we don't really have any of those as our core KPIs. So I think if we're going to have a think about it, I'd really like to see some of those kind of sort of KPIs that tell us a bit more about what's going on within our staff group, within our council, apart from just the kind of the things that I would expect to see. The other thing I'll say is that kind of maybe there's a bit too much, kind of bit too heavy on the planning in terms of those KPIs as well. But it'd be interesting to hear other members' thoughts.
Thank you very much, Nick.
Can I just come back on that one point about the staffing side of things? One of the things that we do on a biannual basis is to do a staff survey. So that's quite a comprehensive survey of all the staff. So that gives, and that does feed in directly, and that has fed in directly into sort of the report that Paul's got on tonight's meeting as well, in terms of that covers a whole raft of issues, and that looks at things like how well people feel they've been treated, how well feel they've been valued. So there's lots of that sort of data is contained within that staff survey. So that's something that we can discuss with members, what that means in the context of the overall performance of the members of staff and how that impacts then upon the overall performance of the authority going forward. So we do that. We do have that information, and we can provide that information as part of the sort of review of how we do, if you like, going forward.
No, that's great. I'm reassuring there's already a data source there that kind of is not having to reinvent the wheel, but we could just create some KPIs around it and extract it out. It'd be quite nice to see a KPI around members as well, I think. I don't know what that might be, but I think there should be some standards that we hold ourselves to, and I think they should be reflected in the KPIs.
Okay, thank you. Rob.
Yeah, and interestingly, it was virtually everything I was going to ask being answered, because it was one of the benefits of me working in a public sector area is I often feel some of the similar sort of trends to you guys feel in terms of staffing and pressure on staffing. And I was going to ask a few more questions to drill down into that staff absence figure about staff welfare. Are we measuring staff happiness? Is it being skewed by certain members having long term? Is there much what sort of proportions are related to potentially emotional health and mental health are we looking after our staff well enough in that respect? These are all sort of themes and things that are very sort of current in my workplace. But really, I think, actually, since I put my hand up to ask the question, there's been quite a comprehensive discussion around that. And I don't really think I need to ask anything else, because but I agree with the idea of attaching some, maybe thinking about the KPIs and focusing in on that staff welfare and staff happiness type surveys. I know it's a difficult thing to measure happiness, but there are ways of trying to do it. But it sounds like a lot of what we need is already there, but maybe it's something we could look at more closely to make sure. And I was just going to ask about what we have in terms of a staff welfare or staff well-being service. What are there direct services that staff can access and self-refer to if they're struggling with things? It's just something we just recently bought into for our own staff in our workplace, which has gone down well with our staff. So I don't know, it's probably not quite the forum for this discussion at the moment, but all those sort of those support networks, you've said they are in place, but nice to know what they are and how much are they accessed, and are staff using them and this sort of thing.
I know there is a variety of different routes that members of staff can go down, depending on the nature of what support they might want to have, from physical through to mental. But what I can do is I can have that conversation with the HR manager and
That'd be great, because one of the things I lead on in
that.
my school is staff welfare. So I've sort of introduced things. I'd be interested on a personal level, actually, for my own interests as well as to maybe suggest things for the councillors from my work, my experience in my workplace, to see exactly what the staff well-being and staff welfare offer is here, and just have a look. I might learn something from it for me, and you might learn something from it as well. So that'd be great. Yeah.
So my impression is that we would like to drill down a little bit into staff welfare in terms of KPIs and the options or the facilities or services that we are offering to staff. So I think we perhaps need to ask that be brought back to the committee at some later date. And then the question that arises following on from that is, who owns the KPIs? Mike, who does own the KPIs?
It's the council.
No, I mean, well, in terms of developing them and so on.
Well, there is at the moment, there's an officer working group which is looking at this whole issue of what we do in relation to corporate performance management, not just in relation to the corporate performance indicators, but also in relation to how we prepare the service plans that individual service managers have to then prepare to feed into the budget setting process. A lot of the focus of that work so far has been to help members with the corporate plan, for obvious reasons. Once we sort of get over this little hump with the corporate plan, then we can start to put some work in train in relation to the other aspects that we've got on that work programme, which is around looking at the KPIs, looking at service plans. And, I'm sure that there's going to be an opportunity for us to be able to have that dialogue with members. And I think it's something we can work out what's the most appropriate forum to have that dialogue with members before we then bring that back here for discussion at this particular committee.
Right, so I think we need to note that as another element, another outcome of the discussion here is to feed in proposals for changes to staff welfare KPIs into the broader set of KPIs of the authority itself. Roger.
Yeah, just
Sorry, actually Nick was before you, I think. So.
Thank you, Roger. You pressed your button, mate. It was literally just to ask, if you've got 20 years worth of data, do you do any trend analysis around that, if you've had KPIs for that length of time? Because that would be quite interesting, because I notice a lot of this is obviously year to year. Do we do, I mean, again, it's an open question. I'm not trying to get you more work, Mike.
Thanks. I suspect we can pull that data out and do some analysis, yes. And one of the things that we did start to do is to look at satisfaction levels, because we have been doing an annual satisfaction survey, and one of the things we did, obviously for the corporate plan, was that big satisfaction survey. One of the things we started to do earlier this year was to do a bit of tracking on satisfaction and see what's happening with levels of satisfaction. But you know, given that we've been reporting these KPIs for a number of years, I'm sure we can look at those and see what trends they provide.
Yeah, it just feels if you've got that length of time and with that amount of data together without them being changed that much, then it feels there's a load of quality there. Hopefully you can get out of it before we do, as Nick rightly points out, Councillor Whitehead suggested any changes and stuff.
Roger.
Thank you. Yes, we're in danger of obsessively analysing your KPIs, I'm afraid. They are a source of endless fascination. It strikes me that with that level of data again, I mean, it may be something which would be quite a good project for a student intern, something like that, because it's not necessarily time pressing. And I recall the list of, I think the page of, was it 6 sheets of ongoing projects, about 150 or so, which we were presented the other day, which I'm going through slowly to see if I think they're relevant. Sorry. But the KPI analysis would look to be quite a good independent area for study, possibly by somebody who isn't a day-to-day employee of the council, providing they're good with a background anyway. The other thing I would just suggest, and I think perhaps Nick was hinting at this, was that if you combine the KPIs with perhaps it was yourself actually, Mike, a second ago, with the satisfaction levels that came out of the recent public survey, or at least combined it with the areas that they were most concerned about, that might give a steer towards where the focus of future ones could usefully lie.
I think that's a reasonable area for us to look at, just to see to what, if we're collecting that data on a regular basis, then does that then, and should that then become something that identifies as being an indicator of the health of the council in the way in which we perform overall. And I think there's an opportunity for us to have a look at that and bring that back.
Does anybody else have any comments? I'd like to bring up the regeneration policy area, which is suffering, I think, at the moment through lack of resources and so on, and a large number of quite complicated development projects. I'm wondering whether we should identify what the issues are, or ask you to work with Steve Capes and perhaps come back to us with some understanding of the issues as you see them, for why the projects are falling behind a bit. My feeling is it's to do with staff resources, the lack of staff resources, and the difficulty in recruitment into this area. But I think it, as evidence for what we need to do going forward, I think it would be useful to understand if that is the case. I mean, it's very difficult. You've been Steve and his team have been very successful at winning grant funding, and the issue is attempting to staff the projects that we've won effectively. Is that right, Mike?
Yeah, I think over and prior to this administration, we as an authority took the decision that we needed to invest more in regeneration service, because we needed to try and ensure that some of the more difficult sites that we'd got on our books, if you like, through the local plan process, needed a little bit of a prod and a poke to start to get going. So, prior to this administration, we'd put together a package of resource, if you like, that we thought we needed to put in place in terms of the skill set to deliver on that. And and as Councillor Hughes says, we have found that skill set very difficult to recruit into. So, for example, many of you probably know Laura Simpson. She's doing the regeneration job. She's doing a lot of work now on the Ashbourne regeneration project. But we originally recruited her in to do a senior regeneration job, but she was recruited at the third, possibly maybe in the fourth attempt to do so. We found it very, very difficult to recruit in to that particular level with the sort of skill set that we were looking for to help and deliver on those projects. Unfortunately now, Laura's now come into post, she's got the skill set, but we're having to divert that to deliver on the Luff project because, again, we couldn't recruit into that post either. So we have found it very difficult to do that, and there is still a need for us to deliver on those projects, and still a need for us to prod and poke those sites to come forward. If you look at the sites that we've got on our books in the local plan, we've got 2 big sites in Wirksworth, we've got the airfield at Ashbourne, all of which still need to come forward and contribute towards delivering our regeneration efforts and also securing our housing needs in the future. The quicker we can deliver on those, and the quicker we can put the local plan in place, the more we've got a much more stable base, a plan-led base, to deliver and support resisting development elsewhere. And that's the key. And I think that sort of gives you a bit of a flavour of where we are with that. I think that's fair to say, Paul, isn't it, in terms of what's happened over the past few years in relation to regeneration service. We still need to maintain that resource. We still need to make sure we've got that level of resource within the team to enable us to get over that, get those schemes off the ground. We are working with, and we're trying to work with Homes England to try and utilise their resource. But again, they're spread very thinly across the whole of the country. And Derbyshire Dales, unfortunately, isn't necessarily for them the biggest priority. They're very supportive when they come to see us and talk to us, but when you look at where they want to put their investments in and the level of investments they want to put in, where they want to put them, Derbyshire Dales doesn't unfortunately get. So one of the jobs we've got to do is keep that negotiation or that discussion process going, keeping our flag alive with Homes England to make sure that actually they're aware that little old Derbyshire Dales is still there, and there's still some big problems that we need to address, in the rural areas, and it's not just about investing in the big urban areas.
Mike, do you see working more closely with D2N2 or the mayoral authority helping out here? I mean, is there a way we can use the expertise available in other authority in sister authorities or
I think I might have to defer to Paul to maybe answer that question, because that sort of I have a very limited involvement directly with those two sort of existing and emerging areas. So I think I'm going to have to sort of.
Yeah, I'm happy to pick that up, Chair. Some of that is happening already on an informal basis, but all authorities are in a very similar position of stretched resource. Yeah. And I think until the level of ambition, if you like, is articulated through the mayoral combined authority and the potential benefits that might be derived by individual areas, it's very difficult to resource up to something when you don't know what you're resourcing to. Yeah. So we're very much trying to manage with an existing resource at the moment, not just this council, but all councils, and particularly for the districts in Derbyshire, it is proving really challenging because it's quite an intense process that we're going through. But clearly, if there are going to be wider benefits arrive further down the road, then we'll clearly have to reflect upon what that means in terms of our establishment and what might need to be supplemented. It's probably too soon to say yet.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Yes, Laura.
Thanks. Yes, I was just wondering if there's any scope for outsourcing this sort of role to consultant project managers. Is that, are they out there?
There is, but it's expensive. That's the thing. I mean, we have outsourced on numerous occasions. We're outsourcing certain elements of the Ashbourne Reborn work at the moment to consultants, but it's very expensive. And the problem is that you don't always get the continuity such that you can learn the lessons from one project. Consultants will then cease their engagement. You'll have another project and the lessons can't be transferred or the skills can't be transferred. So we do try and do that where possible. But in the field of regeneration and economic development at the moment, even the private sector is struggling to recruit because those types of individuals, like planning, are very much in short supply and high demand. So the prices that you end up paying, either to try and recruit somebody permanently on a temporary contract or even through agency, you do pay a premium.
Thank you. Thank you. So we have a bit of a dilemma. Do we reduce our aspiration, or do we try and recruit more people? It comes down to that.
I think it flows very neatly into my report, to be honest, because you can't separate the two issues, really. It's not a lack of financial resource because the council has already approved the resources to bring in the appointments that we've identified, but we've not been able to attract the candidates. So I will perhaps cover it a little bit further on in the next report, Chair.
Right. Are there any other comments Nick?
Yeah, thank you. It was really just on that. Is it worth considering what other options that we could bring to the table, is it worth for us, that we could help support? Because conscious that all of this needs to happen quickly, as it were, whether that is worth going down the private sort of sector or any other options to help stimulate to get the right people into the roles. Because obviously we're here to support and help you. And conscious as well, actually, the longer we take, even if we're worried about the cost of it, actually that's going to impact the project so much that financial impact is going to be completely offset by whatever we're losing or wasting by not doing something.
I think that's a very fair point. And certainly in terms of the financial impact upon the council, it's easier to use the general reserve for short-term projects. It's more challenging, or it will be more challenging, when that cost is an enduring cost, which is going to factor into the main sort of annual revenue budget. So I think if council was to identify very clearly the projects that it wanted to move forward with, and this is where the links to the corporate plan come back in, then we could identify the resource that's needed to actually get them moving. And if we can't attract candidates in, we'll certainly look to partner, or we can look to consultancies to do that. But I think it's having a very clear idea of what the priority projects are, and then let's move forward on those.
Okay, thank you. So in that case, I think we have a set of recommendations, which are basically to note the outturn performance against corporate plan targets and against key performance indicators for 2022-23, and also the 21-22 performance against the Office for Local Government Finance and Waste Management, and to recommend also that the biannual reports continue to be presented to members. I would also like to add to that we note the issues that we've raised, which are to do with the staffing key performance indicators and the the regeneration policy issues. And were there any others that we need? Roger, were there any others?
Yes, it was making some association with the concerns of the public as evidenced through the recent surveys.
Yep, okay. And is that a full set? That's a full set. So can I have somebody to move that recommendation? Nick Wilton. Okay, and to second it? Nick? Okay, and all those in favour? Right. Oh, that's unanimous. Okay, thank you very much. So we move. So did you manage to get all those points? You did. Okay, good. Thank you. Right. So we move on to item 2. I lost my agenda now. There we are. Which is Paul Wilson's paper on resilience, resources and priorities.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Well, this is, to a very large extent, the same report that members received at the council meeting on the 28th of September, with the exception of the additional items that were approved by way of budgetary provision to deal with current staffing issues. As members will recall, unfortunately, we weren't able to discuss the meeting in any great detail on the 28th of September. So in preparation for this meeting, I did circulate the report again to all members of council, inviting any particular comments or views. I haven't received any, so insofar as being able to express the views of other members, I'm not in a position to do that. But I think the real purpose of this report, and my intention in bringing it to council in September, was really to start a debate, to present you with, if you like, a health check or an unhealthy check of the organisation insofar as the staffing establishment, and you will be very much aware of the issue within the report, which points to the demographic of the council's workforce. We do have an ageing workforce. There is a significant percentage of employees who are rapidly approaching either retirement age or the potential to take early retirement, and that in itself is going to pose a significant challenge to the organisation unless we're able to actually respond positively to that, because whilst change is not such a bad thing in terms of bringing new people into the organisation, there's a very significant risk that you will have a significant and quite dramatic loss of corporate knowledge, which will have an impact upon the organisation. And you don't need me to name individuals, but there are key individuals within this organisation who are clearly quite critical to delivering a lot of the key services that the council does provide. Aligned to that, we have very few people under the age of 21, only one employee under the age of 21. So that indicates to me that we are not attracting younger people into local government as a potential career. That's not just an issue which this council suffers from, it's an issue across the whole sector. Local Government Association nationally is looking at campaigns to improve the sort of attractiveness, if you like, of local government to potential younger people as a career choice. But nonetheless, it is an immediate challenge for us, particularly when you look at that age demographic and the impact that it could have over the next few years. So what I've tried to do within the report is to tell you what I think the current challenges are, to outline the current measures that we are taking to improve recruitment and retention in what is a very challenging employment market in a number of sectors. We have strong evidence of our difficulty in recruiting to positions, particularly in finance, audit, planning is a problem. It hasn't been one for us yet, but it may be in the near future. And legal, in particular, are all professions which we are struggling to attract candidates to. It does bring into consideration the issue of pay and recognition and the overall pay and benefits package that the council is able to offer. How competitive we are in comparison to not just our immediate neighbours, but perhaps on a regional scale as well. And what I'm seeking to do is, as I say, open a discussion on potential initiatives, because I don't think there's any silver bullet to this. It will require a package of measures and different approaches, I think, to be taken in order to try and position the council in such a way that we can respond to the challenges that we currently have. So within the report, I do outline a number of measures which are really options for consideration. When I brought this to the council, I was hoping that we may have some discussion around the options that perhaps members are not particularly supportive of, and they could be taken off the table without doing too much additional work on them. Conversely, if there are options that members feel are worthy of further investigation and investment of time and resource to develop a proposal to bring back to members, then again it will be very helpful to know which options they are. There may well be other options that I've not identified in this report, and I very much welcome suggestions as to what they may be as well, because, as I say, I think it is a package of measures that the Council would need to look towards, rather than any one particular option which will solve all of the current challenges which we are facing. So I'm happy to leave it there, Chair, by way of introduction, but clearly open to any comments members may have.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Can I start on this, because I sort of have a view that I'd like to put forward, if that's all right. And I think there's a strategic issue, and there are tactical issues here. The strategic issue is that we have we need to replace our workforce on a regular basis, and progressively, and we actually got a hump at an older age group now, so we have to correct that hump, and we need to act quite reasonably quickly, certainly in the medium term, to do that. And then there are then tactical issues associated with filling gaps that we have, and the two perhaps will be subject to different types of measure. So I was thinking for the first set, which is to do with succession planning and career path development, there are things that we can do in that area, to perhaps restructure the workforce gradually through time, and then that might include first of all creating the career path grade posts, and paying all the training costs to enable people to progress through their career. And in that respect, maybe we'll lose a lot, but all that will happen is we'll gain some from other authorities. So on balance, we shouldn't lose out too much. And it's sort of it's part of our duty really to train a workforce that we can use. And then in terms of filling gaps, there are issues about there's opportunities to use the funds that's available for I can't remember what it's called now. There's a fund that's available here to do that, and allow the payment, higher payments to recruit those people, at least in a short-term basis. So I see two sets of measures really. One to create career paths and enable long-term changes to the structure of the workforce, and succession planning, and the second set of measures to fill in individual gaps. And in that case, then if others are in agreement with that, then we might look at the measures in those terms. Roger.
Thank you. Yes, obviously I've read most of this already. It's always good to be able to reread things again. And you know, I come away with this. It's a very good report, querying the question: why are these options? They're not contradictory. They seem to be supporting each other, and I would recommend approving all of them. I think they're all very good ideas. The one thing I would perhaps draw attention to is the employee benefits package, and I'm always very, very mindful that rather than sort of dishing out cash to people, if there's ways of enhancing a package which don't necessarily cost the authority money, but are effectively in-kind benefits, and the two which spring most immediately to mind would be some sort of discounted access to freedom leisure, and the other would be as councillors do when they're on council business, we have free access to car parking if you were to build a package which was, I'm not necessarily suggesting something as outrageous as that, but if you were to build a package around those, and actually I think probably restrict it to the member of staff concerned rather than family and relatives as well, then I think that would be quite an attractive way of looking at things. And I wonder whether other local authorities have actually done the same.
Discounted access to freedom leisure is a benefit that exists at the moment. If staff take out an annual membership, they do get a reduced rate. In terms of free car parking across the district, that isn't something that's offered. Clearly, members of staff who are required to go out into the district for the purpose of their work do have a parking permit such that they can use council car parks during working hours for the purposes of their work, but it doesn't extend beyond that at the moment.
I mean, I'm just going to build a little bit on what kind of Roger's already said. I absolutely agree in terms of the options. I wouldn't dismiss any of the options. They all seem to be part of the same jigsaw that you have to build to make this work. So I also think it's an excellent kind of report. I was going to make exactly the same point about freedom leisure. So I'd be interested to know what the discount is and how attractive that is. I'd be really interested to know uptake from the staff group, because maybe it's not attractive enough in terms of the discount. So maybe there's something there we could have a look at to make it more attractive to staff. But it'd be good to see what the uptake is. The other couple of points I was going to make was, so around the apprenticeship and then bringing in kind of new staff, what kind of partnerships have we built up with education, with the local schools, with our local colleges, sort of Derby College, Chesterfield College, Derby University? We're in a great place in terms of there's lots of very kind of good educational establishments, but sometimes we need to be proactive in terms of how we go and engage with them, because they're unlikely to come and engage with you unless a student is particularly highlighted. So we've been doing this a little bit with the Grand Pavilion in terms, so we've been working with a couple of interns from Derby University that have been doing bidding for us. And they've been absolutely brilliant. They haven't cost us anything, so that's even better. But I just wonder whether we as a council could start to build some of those relationships, and we just might get some natural. The other bit I was going to say in terms of if we're struggling to attract kind of young people, maybe ask some of our younger staff, and we've got two excellent kind of members of staff here in the meeting tonight, what attracted them to come and work at the council, and is there something about those lessons that that we can learn that would sort of help us in terms of the offer that we go out to. I definitely think the staff benefits could be better. So I look at that as a package. I would say that's a pretty standard package. Maybe with the freedom leisure on entices it a little bit, but I think you're up against much better staff packages, both in the public and private sectors. So I think actually that could be enhanced a lot. In terms of even little things like kind of in the NHS, we get kind of access to kind of preferential loans. We get access to sort of like blue light card, which maybe some of your staff get. I don't know if that kind of is across the public sector. So it means you get lots of discounts in shops. So maybe just looking at what's available that we could buy into that would offer that sort of ability. The other thing I was going to ask was around what flexibility do we actually have in terms of pay and the kind of and so is that not set nationally, or do we have some scope kind of regionally or locally to sort of set different pay rates? Or I know kind of you've got incentives in there, so I think they're a good idea as well. But maybe I was interested a bit about annual leave. Because you've sort of highlight within your report that actually it's not as good as what other local councils would offer, but especially in terms of that extended leave. But it's not as good as what the NHS currently offer as standard right across the NHS, which I get 27 days, but once you've been 5 years, you get 2 extra days, and once you've been 10 years, it goes up to 32 or 33 days. So I think there's probably something there that we could make that a bit more competitive and interesting. And then my last point is around if we're having trouble recruiting to posts, have we thought about doing it differently? So rather than recruiting to posts, have we looked at recruiting to skills? So that's a very different way of staffing, because it means you're not actually putting people in posts for the long term. So it's more like dynamic staffing. So you're bringing people in because of the skills they can offer, the experience they have, and they may work on the Ashbourne project to start with, but actually because of the skill set, they're very easy to move. So actually, if you did need to use them in environmental services, or you need to use them, so kind of really that dynamic that you can use them right across the whole council. And I wonder whether that becomes more attractive for the candidates as well, to know that they'll have that sort of interest and flexibility within their job, kind of their wider job role, and they're not just pigeonholed into one sort of kind of area. So sorry, there's a lot of things there, Paul, but just thoughts really.
And really good thoughts at that. If I can quickly come back on some of them. In terms of the apprentices and links to education establishments, I have to be honest, I don't think we've done enough. I think we could do more. We've got some fantastic education establishments, pretty much on our doorstep. And I think in the past, well, I don't think I know, in the past we've waited for people to come to us. I think we need to go to them, and we need to sell a career at Derbyshire Dales, sell a career in local government. And one of the things that really struck me when I went to the LGA conference in the summer was there was a couple of graduates there, and they both said that if anybody had said to them when they were at university a career in local government, they just wouldn't have thought about it. But when you start to say, okay, well, this is what you can achieve in local government in terms of your value set, your principles, the impact that you can make on your local community, it's a very different package that you put into them. And I think we need to do more of that. In terms of the pay flexibility, yes, there is national pay bargaining, and we are party to that. But the council can offer additional pay above whatever the national pay level may be. So over a period of time, we would basically be able to pay our employees more, subject to affordability. Annual leave, yes, we don't offer as much as some of our neighbouring authorities, let alone health service or other public sectors. And in terms of recruiting to skills, not posts, I'll be honest, that's not something I'd thought of, but I think that's a really good suggestion. In terms of, there are a number of posts throughout the organisation which do require very similar skill sets, and they don't necessarily have to be pigeonholed in one department. So, yes, I'll definitely pick that one up. Thank you.
Thanks. Again, Nick's covered a lot of what I was going to say, actually. And again, this is like a parallel universe for me, sitting around this table. It's just exactly the same issues, pretty much exactly parallel, all the same. How do we recruit staff? How do we retain staff? There's just aren't people out there wanting to fill the roles. So again, a couple of things drawing on experience and just asking questions and suggesting things. Being more proactive than recruitment, which is something you mentioned about. Do we do things like go to the jobs fairs in Derby and that sort of thing? Are we represented there? That sort of event. There are those sort of events that happen regularly, just to raise the profile and make sure people know we're out there. The employee assistance programme, I think you mentioned it in the report, is something that Chesterfield does. That's something, again, that we've introduced recently. It's gone down really well with our staff, because it supports the staff welfare element, but it also offers things like legal support, financial support. It only costs, I think for us as a school, the one we've signed up for costs about £8 per member of staff when you work it out. We think that's really good value for money. And it's something just extra you can offer staff at a minimal cost rather than having to pay more. It's that package that we're talking about. So I would recommend looking at employee assistance programs that are relevant to this sort of institution and organisation. And then the other thing I was just going to mention very quickly was how are we advertising? And the fact we've got such a ageing staff suggests that once people are here, they tend to be quite happy here. They're staying here. So that it's getting them through the door that seems to be the problem, because once they're here, they tend to stay. So are we being creative enough in our advertising and posts in terms of where we're advertising them? I suspect we are, but I'm just asking the question, have we thought about that and reassessed that? Are we advertising in all the right ways, or have we moved with social media and this sort of thing? I'm sure you are, but just to throw it out there. But also, how are we advertising it? So the things that are going out, are we making sure it's really obvious what our package is to employers, rather than just saying, here's the job, you get this much money, put your application in? Are we saying, well, this is our employee assistance program that we offer. This is, you know, making sure that that's there, so we're looking like an attractive employer when people look at the advert. Do we have any figures on sort of the numbers of people who inquire about a job when it's advertised compared to how many actually apply? For example, you know, are we actually getting the hits on an advert, and then the conversion rates to people actually putting applications in? Is that something we can look at as well? So really, that's just a sort of jumble up of thoughts in my head, really, but just throw out there. So, okay.
Yeah, I can come back very quickly. In terms of how we advertise, we've certainly changed in the last 6 to 8 months in terms of how we do that. We do use social media. We're using LinkedIn more, particularly for the professional type roles. In terms of how we sell the council, we try and sell the benefits of a good employer, fantastic place to live and work, benefits the proximity to the national park. And, you know, there is something about the size of the organisation as well. People are attracted to the smaller organisations because generally you can achieve more and you get involved in many different areas of work. So, you know, we do try and tailor that, but again, I think it's a case of us learning from others, and I'm constantly looking at jobs that other organisations similar scale to ours are advertising, thinking, okay, well, what are they doing differently? So I think it's something you can always improve on, and we're certainly looking to do that. And employee assistance programme, I think that's an excellent suggestion. As the report says, Chesterfield do it, we don't. I think it's something we could look at.
Yes, Laura.
Just two thoughts from me, really. Is instinctively, I appreciate the sort of the golden handshake works, and I see from the report that £2,000 is currently offered, and I can see why that would be a big attraction in terms of relocation costs, etc. But instinctively, I would much rather see us investing in people's skills and putting that money into training and development. You know, so I think that should be the emphasis as far as possible. And secondly, from an old person's point of view, is there more we could do to persuade those people who are thinking about throwing in the towel to maybe go part-time, work flexibly, just to keep those skills around for a bit longer, you know, on a more flexible basis?
On the last point, there is certainly the option to take flexible retirement. The reality is very few people choose that option. In fact, I can only think of 2 people in the organisation in the last 5 years who've taken that option, and they didn't take it for very long because they actually found that there was having to try and do a full-time job in part-time hours, and they didn't feel that it actually worked for them. Now, that might be due to the positions that they were in. I think there's a wider issue insofar as local government and the public's reaction to people who work in local government. And this is an issue which came up at a national conference undertaken in Birmingham earlier this week, whereby jobs in local government can be quite challenging. Most jobs can be challenging, I appreciate, but jobs in local government, depending on the type of front-facing role that you may be in, or a senior role. And what we've seen and what we are increasingly seeing, not just as a district council, but as a sector, is that people are reevaluating what the priorities are. We've seen it more since COVID. You know, people have seen that there is more to life, if you like, than constantly being abused every day you come to work. I'm not saying that happens in every case, it doesn't. But people are reflecting and reviewing what they want. And of the conversations that I've had and am having with employees who I know are going to be thinking about leaving us in the next 6 to 12 months, that is a very significant factor. They feel like they've reached the limit of what they want to do. And, you know, a number of those individuals are some considerable years away from state retirement age, if you like. But it's getting harder and harder, and they're feeling like it's just not for them anymore, which is really difficult. And that's not just this council, that is happening across the sector. I'm seeing that in professional journals week in, week out.
Nick Whitehead.
It was just a follow-up question. So I'd be interested to know how the flexible retirement works, because we've just changed it in the NHS to make it so much more flexible. So we can now retire at 55, claim our pension, but then actually go back and work full time. That's just changed, because it used to be you could only go back for a certain amount of hours, but now you can go back full time. So then you're getting the benefit of claiming your pension a bit earlier, but also still building up your pension pot and claiming a full. So I just wondered kind of how ours works here, and do we again have any flexibility in terms of how we would change that as part of your plan?
You can't go back full time. I can't remember the exact percentage, but it's some considerable way less than full time. No, that's part of the local government pension scheme.
Roger.
Yes, I'm slightly troubled by your comment, though I think I understand it, about the degree of pressure which local government staff feel under, perhaps, not just because of the workload or the nature of the work, but perhaps if some of that pressure is being exerted, as I know it is, from individuals and sources outside the organisation, that question about how valued staff feel and the degree of, I'll use the word abuse. It may or may not be that. That might be an individual perception of it, but I'm almost coming back to the previous report where I think perhaps we need to track that, because I'm not sure that all members are aware either how serious that is or how widespread that is.
I don't want to overstate it, but it is a reality, and that's why I mentioned it. And the way it was expressed by the chairman of Solace, which is a local government organisation earlier this week, is there is a loss of civility generally within the community. People are not as civil, they're not as respectful. And, I have frontline staff working in a business support capacity who get abused pretty much day in, day out, for a whole variety of issues, not necessarily because the council's failing to deliver services, but people are certainly a lot less tolerant than they used to be. And that situation has changed dramatically since COVID. I don't know what happened across the COVID pandemic, but there is certainly a very different attitude which is being displayed to many staff on the front line.
Nick, then Laura.
Hi, thanks. Thanks for that. It would be remiss of me as being chair for a GNR to not see the two options 2 and 3 with additional pay, awards and welcome payments as being something we need to check for viability on that before continuing with those. I think particularly if we end up paying a lot of our established and older staff, if they're at the higher band rate, are we going to end up paying them a lot more, and the cost impact and the actual benefit that we'll get from that in retention or otherwise. But a lot of the other things that I saw was, and these are things that I see within jobs, is secondment as well. I don't know if you have that as part of your HR policies. Again, it helps with the skills, with the cross-pollination in different roles to second them to those. It might be the change of scene helps as much as anything else. That worked for myself. Job shares as well. I think that's a really good thing. Again, with people who particularly who I've managed, they've struggled with the role, and they found it with a particularly abusive or difficult working relationship with a outside party. We ended up putting them in a job share, and actually that was a better way for them to manage that scenario together with the job sharing partner. Actually, it was really good. The other thing as well was, can you buy leave as well? Because that's something with that's something we currently do in my role. Yeah, we could say, but again, I'm not sure what structures, again, because a lot of the ideas are great within the NHS, but I don't know legally how long it would take to set a lot of those things up as well. And also to brief all staff, and obviously you'd have to have the unions involved as well to get those through, so it'd be quite tricky and time consuming. Additional nursery support as well for any people as well. Again, that's something that we see, and it's sort of that helps us. So there's companies like Eden Red that have opened opportunities, particularly with our business. Again, that's just something that helps it for people. And also, is there clear sort of personal development plans within, say, like the legal or finance team to say if you come to join us, we'll help pay for your exams, or do say AAT or CIMA? So have we got that sort of clear sort of cut? So when we're selling a job, we can say you can come here and you can be educated, and it kind of keeps that retention in.
If I can comment on that last point, we used to pay 100% of an employee's course fees in order to enable them to gain a qualification and progress within their profession. That was reduced quite a number of years ago to 50%, with the employee paying 50%. The principle being that the employee gains a transferable qualification, which will enhance their career prospects. It was also in response to the budget situation we faced at that time. That is now impacting on us, because if you take somebody in finance who would want to do a SIPFA qualification, I think the last time I checked, a SIPFA qualification costs about £21,000. So, with the best will in the world, it's pretty unrealistic to expect a member of staff to find that £10,000 to get that qualification. And that's why one of the options that I identify in the report is I think we need to start to identify those individuals in the succession plan or those professions whereby we may have a bright star in our organisation that does have potential, that we invest in them to try and keep them, and we actually support them through that education process. We couldn't pay for all qualifications because that's going to be pretty unaffordable across the board. But I think to identify those areas whereby we do need to grow our own and keep them is certainly something that we should look at.
Thank you, and obviously particularly in audit as well, because that's something we've only recently remedied.
Okay. Nick, I think Laura's next.
I was just going to go back to my earlier point, actually, which, I mean, it's horrific, really, that people feel that way, having got to the end of a long career, that they end it with that sort of feeling of just having totally had enough. And, I mean, is it possible to give them an opportunity to step back from the front line but still be around to support the younger ones who are still on the front line, or to restructure rather than just saying, okay, you can go down to 3 days? Could we restructure and give them a bit more of a cushioned environment and say, please stay on?
I think in principle, yes. I think it comes down to obviously the financial impact of that, because you'll have individuals, whatever grade that they're on, and you'd have to bring in another person to effectively take over their role over a period of time. And the person who's going to be exiting the organisation may well choose to use their skills in different ways. Coming back to flexible skills issue, that's certainly an option that we could look at. So yeah, I think that's got some potential.
Okay, any more comments? Can I just bring up one or 2 points? We in 5.1 you say that the process is focused internally, looking only to establish relative responsibilities when looking at new jobs and so on. And I worry about that because in 5.4 you say that the spine points have lost on average 25% of their value. And this goes back to Nick Whitehead's point that recruiting to post or recruiting to a skill level, and can we be flexible about the type of the post so that we can match the post to the post delivers remuneration. Does it deliver anything else? Because skill could be set. If you've got the right skill, then you might be in a different post level. I don't know. I mean, how does it work like that, or?
Yeah, one of the key issues that we are required to comply with is the scheme of job evaluation and making sure that we pay jobs of the same level of responsibility equal value. So it's the whole issue of avoiding any equal pay claims, such as like Birmingham is experiencing at the moment. So it's identifying the extent of the task, the nature of the responsibility that individual carries, and making sure that comparable posts across the organisation are paid on an equal basis to that. It's very difficult to apply that when you're just talking about skills, because the things that you assess under the job evaluation scheme are very much related to responsibility for budgets, responsibility for staff, exposure to different types of working conditions. It's not about the skills of the individual, it's about the remit of the post. So we would have to find a way of almost creating generic posts, if you like, which would benefit from a certain skill set and try and job evaluate those. I think that's probably one of the reasons why it's not been done in the past, but it's not beyond the realms of possibility.
I've worked in a number of consultancies and not much else. I've worked in a bank as well, and the bank was post-orientated. The consultants were all skill-orientated, and you got paid by the level of skill you had, and you didn't know what anybody else was being paid unless you asked them, because everybody got paid individually and based on what they could compete with each other to get. So it was quite a completely different market, really. But basically, there was an expectation that if you didn't get paid enough, you'd up and go. And and I feel that we've run into that situation here. That we can't, if we don't get paid enough, we can't recruit the people. And maybe what we need, and it's probably mainly in the technical areas where you have particular qualifications like planning or legal or accountancy or something like that, that these really difficult decisions, difficult ways of recruiting happen. And project management in terms of, again, project managers are worth their weight in gold at the moment. So I can understand why it's impossible to recruit into regeneration because of that. I feel that there is a need for a different type of post, which is perhaps associated with the skill that the people have rather than their level of responsibility. Now, in the last big consultancy, but one big consultancy I worked in, there were two streams really. There was an administration and management stream, and there was a technical stream, and you could earn a lot, just as much as a technical person as you could as a manager or a senior manager. You didn't have to have anybody reporting to you. You could still earn as much as a very senior management, even the managing director. So it was all down to the need to compete for scarce resources in terms of staffing. So I wonder whether we could do something along those lines. I mean, that was extreme, but along those lines.
It was really just to follow up on your previous one on the project management. Actually, that would be kind of an excellent role for that to be done in, I think, with skills-wise, because project management is quite a broad church. In fact, we hire, where I work within infrastructure, we hire quite a few people from the NHS, to be honest with you, to come in and project manage, because it's about the skill set and stuff, which is a broad church in itself. Stuff. And the variance of it is the interest of it is the variance of projects, because we're always going to be doing projects for a greater or lesser degree, whether that's in IT or whether that's going to be a regeneration project.
On doing career development, then you're also doing succession planning and vice versa. So then there are measures that will lead to better career development and better succession planning. For example, paying for training and that sort of thing, as far as we are able to do so, and creating career path posts and so on. Then the other area is really meeting the needs of individual skill sets, which we're lacking and we need. And that is then we need to do something tactically in terms of pay and conditions. But overall, then I think we also need to do something about deciding what additional benefits would be attractive to help recruitment. And we've had a lot of good ideas here, and there are good ideas in the paper as well. And I don't know how we pursue that. Is it possible to pursue that through some research with staff. I don't know how you do that, because you might create some sort of that might cause problems. I don't know.
Yeah, I think the way in which we could progress this is clearly a number of the measures do have financial implications, and we would need to have the assurance from Karen in particular that any measures that we introduce are affordable in the longer term. So, when we come to set the budgets, we can have a look at some of the issues there as to whether it's financially prudent for the council to consider the implementation of those at that time, particularly having regard to the medium-term financial plan, because the one thing I've been careful to do within this report is to work very much within the resource limitations that we currently have. And I've only identified the use of a reserve that is currently underutilised without impacting on any enduring cost moving forward. So that's the principle I've set for now. But there will be an opportunity to look at that as part of the budget process. In terms of the other measures, I can actually start to take some of these through the employee group, which we have. So through the employee engagement process, we do have all staff briefings as well to try and gauge the level of support for some of these initiatives and whether the senior managers in the organisation think they would make a difference. The biannual staff survey that Mike mentioned earlier, we're just about to start the 2023 version of that. So again, some of this could be brought into that to gauge the staff response to them, and through the joint consultative group, through the employee group, if they find support and they're affordable, clearly we can then look to start to implement some of them. But I've taken some very clear messages from this evening and some really helpful suggestions as well. So thank you, Chair and members.
So can I have someone to move the recommendations then? And in that we are approving all of the options, I'm afraid, and some more. And yeah, that's all we have to do. Okay. And Nick Whitehead and Nick Wilton. Okay. All those in favour? Right, unanimous. No, Laura, you're not.
No, I didn't realise we were about to vote on the whole package in one go, and I do have some reservations about option 3, to be honest, because if we're only talking about a reserve of 150,000, and we can only spend that once, then option 3 is going to use more than half of that in 1 year, and will commit the council to forward spending unless you're going to take that 1% away from people in another year. I'm a bit worried about that. I mean, I don't want to be the person, obviously, who stops people getting a pay rise, but that seems like a big chunk out of available cash.
If I could respond to that, Chair. The 150,000 reserve that we've got would certainly not be used to pay any enhancement to the National Pay Awards, because that clearly is an enduring cost. Once that goes into the base budget, it's there every year thereafter. So if an initiative such as that was to be taken forward, I would only bring that at the time that the council is considering the budget. So at that point we will know if the pay award is not settled, and invariably it never is, but if the pay award is not settled, we would make an estimate on what that would be, and it would be for council to consider whether it wished to give an uplift on that, and that uplift would then be factored into the budget setting process for that particular year and in subsequent years. So whilst what I'm taking from this evening is that option 3 may be something for consideration, it's certainly not something I would look to finance from that reserve. It's not sustainable for the reasons that you say.
All right.
Yeah, I was just going to say the wording on it as well, because I was looking at all the financial ones. It would need to be demonstrated to be financially sustainable. So if it doesn't demonstrate that, then it's not going through GNR. Sorry, Chair, just to check, do we hold the vote on that? Just because obviously we had the quiet query there. Do we need to reset that, or are we okay with the vote in the end?
We can re-vote. All those in favour?
I was just checking, because obviously you had the query.
Oh,
okay.
Right. It was unanimous. So then we move on then to the updated Scrutiny Committee work programme. And as part of that, we've got a fairly long list of tasks now. And there's an issue about prioritising the tasks, and there's an issue about how we undertake these tasks, and if we want to move them, change them, or anything. So, does anybody have any comments on the work programme? Yes, Mick.
So I was happy to see it set out there because it was part of what we discussed at the last meeting, wasn't it? And good to see that the dates have gone in against some of the key things. So it's good to have that in our minds. The only thing I wanted to add to this, just when I've been reflecting over the week, and this is reflecting really off the back of our planning meeting a couple of weeks ago, and something I'd like to scrutinise as a future thing, which absolutely right, David, in terms of prioritisation. It might be quite a while before we get to it, but it's around the Section 106 negotiations, because I was so disappointed that we had a couple of wonderful, absolutely wonderful projects that came to planning, and they did go through, but the saddest thing about them was the two most attractive projects had no affordable housing included in it at all. And actually the Section 106 money was so measly in terms of supporting anything else. It was really disappointing. And I think the reflection I took away, and I know I was quite vocal in the meeting, but I wondered whether this is something around the mindset in terms of how we enter into these negotiations, and most importantly, how we assess viability. Because it seemed to me on one of the projects, the developer was, just on some of our rough calculations, was making millions, like a lot of money from this project. And the fact that we couldn't have negotiated something to make it a more inclusive development for our whole community, it seemed like we missed a trick. And so I just wondered whether that's something Scrutiny Committee could consider in terms of, it'd be interesting to hear how our planners approach those negotiations, what happens, and actually can we inform the mindset and reset it. And I just thought it'd be a really good thing for Scrutiny to investigate how it currently works and how it possibly could work a bit better. So I know I'm adding to the agenda, but it just seemed like one that was important to me and probably other to members as well.
Yeah, I think you're right in saying it'd be important to other members too. I mean, I'm getting some nods around the table, and I will nod as well. So I think it is something that we would like, as collectively, we probably would want to see. I would note that Chris Whitmore is working on a briefing for councillors on Section 106 payments and how they evaluate it, determined. And it probably could follow on from that. I mean, that would be, so perhaps if we have Chris Whitmore's event and then come back to this after that and revisit it then, or would you like to put something in, would you like to put a placeholder in on the work programme now?
I mean, it'd probably nice to have a placeholder, but I absolutely agree with that. I mean, if Chris is doing some work, we should obviously have the respect to sort of see what he's coming out with, and that might help inform us. But I think there will be something that members will want to sort of dig down onto.
Yeah, I agree with the Section 106, and mine was really from an infrastructure point of view, not just that as well, because I think that really needs feeding. I think something we've missed a trick on, I think.
But would you want to make the decision to have one now, or to have that to scrutinise that now, or wait until Chris Whitmore's report?
Wait until Chris's report, and probably incorporate it as part of a general Section 106 review.
So if we note it in the minutes at this stage, so we can come back to it at a later stage. Okay, good. And the other, so we have a number of fairly large projects here. I mean, there are some which are concerned with reviewing monitoring reports, which we can do in this meeting. But then there are other, for example, the first one on the second page. Oh, second page? I think it's the second page. Overview of information systems. Whoa, that's a big one. I'm not quite sure. We need proper terms of reference for that, because I don't understand quite what that will mean. So was it? Did this come out? Did it come out of this meeting? I can't remember now.
Yeah, so this was about, if you remember, it was talking about actually how the public perceive us and use our services. And as we're moving more digital in terms of that engagement with our community, getting them to use the portal. And I think members, we had a little brief discussion, didn't we, about, well, how do we know that the public actually like using it? And what were the people falling through the gaps? So those people who are digitally excluded, are we kind of assured as a council, as members, that actually we're still providing a way in which those members of the community can still take part and engage in our services? So I think it came from that conversation.
I think I must have got that mixed up in my mind, because I see it as this may actually be adding to the work. I think that was part of the consultation and engagement process. That's how I recalled that, which are equally important. And I think those two actually dovetail with each other. So I would suggest including those together. There was something else I was going to say. Oh, I know what it was. Just a very, very brief thing, actually. I just noticed at the top of the page here, it's still got 2 dates in for this is an aside, our next scheduled meetings. And I think we've had alternative dates for those now, haven't we? So they're no longer the 14th of December or the 29th of January, but I can't recall what they actually are now.
Okay, so we want to revise the meeting, the work program accordingly.
Well, particularly if this is a heavy workload, just need to clock when those dates are again.
I feel that the consultation and engagement process is different from the overview of transparent of information systems in the way that Nick has described it. I mean, they may dovetail, but I think there's a different focus.
Well, maybe we should be narrowing that down then, because I think I shared that understanding that we were talking about the information systems that relate
as it affects to the public and
engagement,
and I would
not the whole of the IT system.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And I would prioritise the public bit very heavily over anything internally.
Okay. Given that perhaps could we do that then, put them into the consultation, that the public engagement part of the IT systems into the consultation and engagement process, and remove the whole of the overview of the information systems?
Yeah. So maybe kind of join them. If they are linked, it would be better to sort of have Helen to come along with Glenn, and because there may be overlapping areas across both of those things where they're right. Kind of Roger's right. They do dovetailing quite nicely. So maybe actually getting both of those on the same meeting would be a way, but then probably would have to move something off that meeting, the December meeting, wherever it's been rearranged to. So maybe the waste collection, because I think that's going to be a very meaty kind of conversation, and probably it might be worth just maybe delaying the waste meeting past December and put that into the February meeting, whenever that's rearranged to, because we might have some better data from the new kind of schedule, the new routines that they're going through, to actually see have we seen the benefit of that. And I'm not sure whether we've had enough time passed to really see the benefit, because I know there's still some teething problems, especially in my area, about the waste collection since they've changed. So we may need that to settle down and then see what the data's saying. So maybe that would be the one to move, David. That would be my suggestion.
Okay, so we will remove the overview of the information systems, and then we will move waste collection to later in the year. I would like to move up the scrutiny of the lead local flood authorities' advice, because I believe the planning process is failing quite markedly in that area, because the officers and then the committee is not getting a thorough analysis of the proposals that the developers are making about flood mitigation and water runoff and so on. So I would like to bring that forward, and but I feel that a number of these we cannot do in one meeting. For example, I don't think we can scrutinise the waste contract in a single meeting, and I suspect we can't do that with the consultation and engagement process. I think we need proper terms of reference for both of these projects, and to determine the tasks that actually have to be undertaken, and the analysis that we want to do to ensure that we meet any objectives that we have. Because at the moment, we don't really have any objectives in each of these tasks to meet. Now, I wrote some terms of reference for the scrutiny of the scrutiny of the LLFA, and I feel that provides us with a framework that we could adopt for other larger scrutiny projects. So we identify what the issues are, we have an overall what we want to achieve, the overall aim, and then the objectives of the project, purpose, then the approach that we're going to follow, and that's each of these. I mean, I think it's this common process. It's fact-finding, assessment, draft reporting, and final reporting. The draft reporting being a report that we produce, the final report being one that's been gone through Kerry Francis and has been quality assured by others. I think we will need to do that, because in some cases we may be treading on toes, and we will need to make sure that we are able to do that within the legal constraints of the committee, given that it is something which is a sort of is set up under law. So we need to make sure that we follow the law in these larger scrutiny projects. So what I'd like to do is add that broad framework as a standard for the terms of reference that we will adopt in running these larger projects, if that's okay with the committee. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that it's an excellent piece of work there. I hadn't realised you'd pulled that together, but it's really good.
Okay. So therefore, I feel that we need to have similar terms of reference to the waste collection contract and the consultation and engagement process. And I don't know if whether we have to do that ourselves, or Tommy, or how do we do that? Do we put forward some ideas and then you write them, or?
Yeah, it's certainly something that officers could help with, to do some scoping exercises on those two topics. I think obviously with Helen coming in quite soon, her expertise would be really helpful in producing some terms of reference, or starting a scoping exercise for those that could then be brought to members, or could then be approved with yourself as chair between the meetings to keep things moving.
Right. Okay. Should we attempt to do that then? Yeah. Good.
So I was just going to say, because you've done this excellent work on this, so we already, and if other members are happy with these as terms of reference, should we not suggest that we bring the kind of flood authority kind of discussion to the next meeting? Because if we've already got the terms of reference and we haven't developed those for the other two areas,
okay,
it would seem sensible to use the good work you've done. I suppose the challenge will be, can we compel anyone to come from the right agencies? Because I wonder, because will Severn Trent be involved in these discussions as well?
They could very well be.
Well, they should be. Yeah.
Well, what I was going to suggest, I don't think we'll get them to come to the next meeting, but what I was going to suggest that we ask for the fact finding to be done for the next meeting, and then in a report, and then following on from that, we can then do, well, not even all the fact finding. Really, we need to know what the legal responsibilities are, and collect the information about the problems that are arising because of it. So interviewing Chris Whitmore and the planning team and residents and others who may, and possibly developers as well. And that would form, so we'd understand what the problem was. And then if we have that as a report, and we receive that report and accept it at the next meeting, we would then want to then have we'd then need to address that with the LLFA officers and the County Council and possibly Severn Trent. Although I'm not sure we've got authority over Severn Trent. Which would be the 6th of December, yeah. So it would be, so we take bits of it at each meeting, so we can do it side by side with other work that we're doing. If that was, and that would allow work to be done in background between the meetings. Would that, do you think that would work, Tommy? Yeah. Would that be okay? All right. So is there any more discussion to be had about this, except how do we develop the waste collection contract terms of reference and the consultation and engagement process terms of reference? Would anybody be willing to put their ideas on paper in the same sort of way and provide them to Tommy for the next meeting so we can approve them?
I could pick up the waste collection.
Yep.
If you want to. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I can put some ideas forward. I don't think it will be as comprehensive as what you've done on the LLFA for the community engagement, but I would defer to my colleague here. Well, both, I think. So a team effort, perhaps.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. So you'll bring back terms of reference for the next meeting.
Yeah, I'd probably share a draft amongst us as well beforehand,
Yeah.
just to sort of get us all on one page. So
Yeah.
no pun intended.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. So that probably gets us to. Is that all right? Would you like to make any comments on that, Paul?
No, happy for member assistance on that, Chair. I think the local flood authority one is going to be quite a challenging review, and I think you're right that it will take a number of meetings to work through that, but we need to start making some progress.
Yeah. Okay. Laura.
A very small question about today's programme. We're supposed to be reviewing the Q1 performance indicators today. Yeah. Well, I don't want us to get behind. Are we going to have 2 Qs to do next time?
Mike, have you got any comments on that?
I'd written it down underneath. Well, before you got to Section 106 agreements, I'd written it down. So I think given the work programme that you've got emerging at the moment, there's obviously quite a lot in there. What I want to do is I can take some sort of thoughts away and bring something back, not necessarily formally, but we can do that by sending things around to members and getting a sort of a similar sort of terms of reference for that, but utilising probably the Office of Working Group that has been set up to look at that.
All right, thank you. And the other, I suppose there are some practical issues about how we progress these with officers, because there will be work to be done between meetings. So I think that's something to be discussed with Helen Mitchell. When's she coming? 6th of November. Okay, so that's great. Okay, thank you.
Oh, and we noted about section 106 to be a future. Can I just say, Chair, what an excellent meeting and high quality discussion from all.